man, very funny man as well. You knew him well. He was a very, very dry man, and we had some good laughs together. And yeah, the tragedy is that he's not here as a man. I mean, he left some great music behind, but I think the tragedy is, as a man, he's not here anymore. So we're going to be introducing some people. As you probably saw, Annie Haslam was on there. We've got Ty Spanley about that. Do you know what? Back here, it's like the Grammys, only the way the Grammys used to be, with proper musicians. Does that make sense? We've got some great people here lined up, including a lot of people who played with John over the years. But I want to bring on a man, first of all, who not only was he John's manager, he was a very, very close personal friend. So I'd like you to put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Martin Darville. Take a seat, Martin. Any seat at all. Here we go. I think you'll find that is working. So where did you first meet John? Go on and just speak into it. Should be switched on.
Well, I first met John at Kenny Jones's house in Sussex, or Surrey actually, and it went from there.
You actually made an album, didn't you?
Oh yeah, no. This is all about John Wetton.
No, but he was on it.
Yeah, I think we should bring the Asia guys on, to be honest.
Well, we will do. But I mean, this man, you were his friend. You were a very close friend.
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a privilege. But
well, that was the word. That's the word that we use. I mean, because everyone who's worked with John uses that word, and there's very few people in the business who use that word. But he's right. I'd like to bring on now three guys who were very, very important in John's life. They were the founder members, along with John, of Asia. So, Carl Palmer, Steve Howe, and Jeff Downs. Thanks for joining us today, guys. I suppose we'll start down that end. Carl, the rhythm section is always considered very, very important in a band. What was it like playing with John?
Quite interesting, actually, because you know, being a prog drummer, you have lots of tempo changes and things. And when you get down to playing strictly songs where the tempo's the same throughout the whole piece, you obviously need somebody who's going to play extremely tight with you. And John was interesting, actually, because I can truthfully say, apart from being a friend of mine for more than 44 years, believe it or not, I added it up this morning. We first met in 1972. He was a big fan of ELPs. When I got round to actually playing with John, I realised how steady he was. He was almost like the Rock of Gibraltar. You know, most bass players, I can definitely move, you know, I can get them to rush a little bit into the chorus and then hold up, you know, certain things that I personally like to do. With John, very, very difficult to move, very difficult, and impeccable time. I would say possibly the best time of any bass player that I've ever played with on that level of playing songs. And an absolute joy to work with. Not all of the time, you know, none of us are, you know, we've all got problems. John didn't like rehearsals too much, but he was always well prepared when he came, I'll tell you that. And he did something which was really unusual. Most guys will come to rehearsals and they'll just play the bass and they don't always sing. I will give John absolute credit. Every time he picked up his bass, he would sing and play at the same time. And I know why, because that was probably the only practice he would ever have, because he wouldn't do much at home. And when I asked him, I said, how do you learn the set, John? You know, when we change things around. He said, I just put the live videos on and I just run through it like that, which was a great thing. A great man and a great bass player from a time point of view.
Well, Steve, you obviously have been in Yes for many years, and you played with some great bassists, Chris Squire, of course, and at the same time in the 70s, when you were working throughout the world with Yes, John was with King Crimson. And although they're not the same, and no two bass players are the same, there are some similarities, because John, like Chris, was a very lyrical, I would say, bass player. What was it like working with him in Asia? We've heard what Carl had to say, but what was it for you?
Well, I'd just like to add a couple of things. I think one of the characteristics of John Wetton was that, like Carl was saying about, he didn't like rehearsals. He had a kind of jazz musician streak, didn't he? He was like, I'll be all right. I'll get on there. It'll be absolutely fine. Don't worry. He didn't worry, and that meant you didn't really worry, and he did do that. I mean, look, John. There were two approaches John had on the bass. I mean, in Family, in UK and King Crimson. I mean, he was a techno wizard. He was a guy who could. In fact, he could improvise. He didn't often do that with Asia, but he could improvise, which is another jazzy kind of a trait, I guess. But there were two sides of it. And when Asia got formed, I think Jeff would agree that basically this was really a song-based group. This was not a jamming band. There was not too much noodling. So John provided a much more songwriter sort of bass work. A little bit simpler. It was well played. It was beautiful sounding, and he delivered it really strong. Like Carl was saying about his sense of time, and that really was strong. So he brought that all his experience in the prog bands and the highly musical bands into Asia. But to simplify it, he wasn't going to noodle around on the bass. So he was a different player, really, from the guy in UK Crimson Family, I think. He was much more simplistic, and he drove the band along, and of course that was the era when 8s on the bass were pretty cool, like, Wildest Dream, and we were all feeding off the things that were popular at the time. And John knew what they were, and he could damn well play them, and he was brilliant.
Jeff, you had an incredible songwriting partnership with John from the off, literally from the first time you wrote. I mean, how easy was it? I know you told me in the past that it was almost instant. Was that the case?
Yeah, I think we, as soon as I sat down at a piano with John, we were going to write something for the first Asia album, it just kind of clicked, It was very much a case of, he would have one section of a song and I'd have another section, and we literally just put those together. I know it sounds quite simplistic, but in fact that was the way that it operated. So even going to the more recent stuff that we wrote from say 2004, 2005 for the Icon project, the approach was very similar, and the great thing about John was he had a kind of inner idea about what a piece of music was going to do. He didn't sort of say, oh, well, maybe we should try this, try that. He had a very, very solid foundation of what he thought the music should be. And, I miss him immensely because it was such a great combination, I think, that he and I had together.
Of course, like you, he had a great sense of melody as well, didn't he?
Well, I think that's why we were two sort of peas in a pod, really, because he had that great bass sensibility. So when you invert a chord, he wouldn't just hang about on the root note. He'd take that bass part up. In many ways, similar to how Chris Squire used to do in Yes. A lot of the Yes music has got the root movement and the bass changes, and it puts a whole new dimension on the music. And John had a lot of that sensibility, and also we came from similar backgrounds in that we'd sung a lot in church choirs and that sort of thing. So a lot of those anthemic choruses that we wrote specifically for Asia were based around that sort of that music, the music of English church music, which is instilled in both of us.
Yeah, and I think actually the influences were pretty well to the fore with a lot of the stuff that you wrote as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've got some questions here from the Japanese fans, guys, and I'd like to ask you some of these. This question is from Masahiko Naton. Carl, do you have any interesting, funny stories about John during that first Asia tour of 1982 that you can repeat?
There's many I can't. Coming to mind, there was one which was quite interesting. I think it was the making of Only Time Will Tell. So we were making the video. As you know, a video takes nearly all day. They shoot each individual member on their own, then they shoot the group collectively, and then they normally have enough to edit something together. And all these special effects are usually done separately. Well, on the day we did Only Time Will Tell, John thought the session was over. It was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and basically it wasn't. And he went to his dressing room and started to shave. Yes. So he then comes out and the producer says, we need to do this one section again. Looks at John in astonishment. John's getting ready, by the way, to go out that evening. That was John's deal, God bless him. And the producer, who got in cream actually with the people, they said, Kevin said, John, what's going on? He said, I'm just getting ready to go out. Oh, we need you. We need you again. We've got to do something because we can't shoot you now with a clean face after you've had a bit of stubble. So I remember watching them cut some hair from the back of his neck and sticking it on so it looked like it would work. And it did. Do you remember that, guys?
Yeah, so that video you saw earlier, it's not real stubble.
And as soon as that was taken care of, John went back in, had a wash, and off he went, and he was gone. Ready for the club that night, so that was it. That's the funniest story. There's plenty of others, but it's a family show, isn't it? We should go in. Yeah.
Every time I see that video now, I'm going to look more closely.
Please do. It's done very well, by the way, by the makeup artist.
I never noticed until you mentioned it now. Steve, we've got a question from Tomo Homer. What is your favourite song of them, or the best Asia song that John was involved with in a writing sense? Sorry, that's from Yuko Ashitagawa.
Well, that made all the difference. I mean,
Yeah,
now
it
it's
does.
a completely different question. I mean, now I've got to rethink the answer. You know. I just like to say that, like Jeff said about writing songs with John, it was really, really nice. It was always easy. And when we started writing stuff, and we started to cook up Cutting It Fine and a bit of Here Comes That Feeling, and then I played him One Step Closer and things. Like Jeff said, he was a great guy to write music. It was a bottomless well. You know, you couldn't get to the bottom of John's creative ideas. There were just more of them. So what was that question again?
What is your favourite song?
I don't have. I mean, my least favourite question is, what's your favourite song?
All right. I'll send the answer back to Japan.
What I'd say was, surprisingly, you know, the first two records, of course, you know, the first one, Mike Stone was on fire, you know, and he was such a great producer. Right, that point, that pivotal point for us, we needed a guy who was red hot, and he was red hot. But I'm thinking about the three albums we made, you know, in our reunion, because there's some beautiful stuff in there, and it really just surprised me, actually, how good some of those last the albums we did, the reunions. So just out the blue, you know, I really don't know, because I really, honestly, truthfully, don't have one single favourite. You know, I think it's very hard. It's a tough question. But if I was forced and you had my arm wrenched up my back and you were holding my throat, I'd have to think of one. But I still can't. They're all nice. I mean, come on, we made 5 albums. They were all pretty nice. But I did like, as I said, the tracks on those last 3 albums mean a lot to me. Even on Triple X, I said to John, for God's sake, don't let's call it Triple X. He said, no, it's got to be called Triple X. I said, it's got to be not called Triple X. But it was called Triple X. But that album is us working with that Mike Paxman, really kind of getting some good things. So I think, I'm not going to pick one, but you've got to guess what you like.
Well, that's a good answer, but I think Carl said it. They're all good.
There's plenty to choose from.
Here's the final question from the Japanese contingent, who sadly couldn't be here today. This one is from Tomo Homer. Starting with you, Jeff, what is the most unforgettable thing for you about John?
I think a lot of people probably here who saw John, you know, in performance or listened to his music wouldn't really know the man inside, you know. And I think that out of a lot of people that you know, that I can only try and explain to know John was, I don't think anybody really knew it per se, because John was such a deep person in a lot of ways, and I think, you know, from my own standpoint, I think I got somewhere towards the middle of his extremely complex personality, but as I say, I don't think anyone ever really knew John, because he was so deep, he was so complex as a person, and you know, on that level, he was just a great friend and a great guy to be around, because he had all these wonderful stories about his experience in the past, and you know, from my own standpoint, I was very privileged to be a part of his life. You know, I think that's all I can really say, that he was such a great guy.
Okay, Steve, what about you?
What surprised me sometime was that I was in, I think it was Durham or somewhere like that, and we're in this awful hotel, and John and I both hated this place. It was like a mausoleum. But anyway, we met outside and had a cup of tea or something, and he started telling me how much respect and love he had for Alcoholics Anonymous, because he got a guy who was helped and needed help to get over, you know, life problems. And I was astounded how much he saw that as not only good for him, but what he was doing was good for other people. He was passing on the love and help that he'd had from them, and he passed it on. And I think that was something I really respected John for, to be able to deal with it after all the hell he'd put himself through, all the, you know, all the stuff he'd been so close to the edge with. And then he found he could get help from AA, and then what they asked him to do was help other people who were in exactly the same shit he was in. And he did.
How about you, Carl?
Just to carry on where Steve left off, not to harp on it for too long, but, you know, John really did take it to the edge, you know, and, you know, a lot of people thought he would never come through it, would never survive. He did, you know, and he came out of it blazing. He came out of all of this darkness, he came out of it singing better. He was one of the few guys that I've ever worked with that as he got older, he sang better. That doesn't happen, you know, people start to drop a semitone or whatever, but John started sounding better. You know, whether he was practicing at home, who knows? I very much doubt it, but nevertheless, so, you know, an extraordinary character, really, really strange. And what a lot of people don't know, and I'm not very good at doing it, but John was very good at impersonating certain people on the television. And if you were in an airport board, he would come out with a great Irish accent, you know, and you'd know immediately who it was, you know. So, an entertaining guy as well, and could be extremely funny, and could be serious. A well-read chap, by the way, extremely well-read. You know, overall, just a great person. I got introduced to him, just so you all know, via Greg Lake. As you know, John was in King Crimson after Greg left, and that's how I got to meet John. And I used to go out with him occasionally, because John was always amazed because I didn't drink. I actually didn't start drinking till I was 22, and I remember sitting down and talking to him about, I tried a pint of beer, but I don't like it, and, you know, he just couldn't work that out at all.
Well, look, guys, I really appreciate your personal thoughts on John, and I think the song, yeah. I think the song "Extraordinary Life" is a really apt song for John, and I know by what you guys have said that you feel privileged to have been a part of his life. So, Jeff Downs, Steve Howe, Carl Palmer, and
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're going to bring some more people on, but give these guys a round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay, you're going to stay on. Right, we're going to bring on a couple more guys, very important people, who work with John very, very closely. I'd like to introduce